what we imagine when we hear this story is young people primarily, low-paid people primarily, often zero contracts kind of people too, who don't feel any sort of job security, having to put up with the unacceptable and, quite frankly, the illegal at work.
It is totally illegal, and you're quite right. And this started about 5 years ago when the Bakers Union had about 1,000 complaints. And they reported that. And McDonald's said at the time, there's no place for harassment and bullying in our workplace. Yet it continues, and it's only come to light this week again because other young people are standing up for themselves. And it's a power thing, this.
Yes.
It's not just sexual abuse, it's power. It's older people preying on younger people in the workplace. And I think it's disgraceful. And what's happening at McDonald's, they deserve to really be taken to the cleaners by those young people, I'm afraid.
They certainly do. Now, McDonald's, lots of the branches are franchises, aren't they? So
That's right.
They're operated by individuals as separate businesses, but acquiring the food and having the menus and everything else, the uniforms provided by McDonald's, the decor as well. Does that mean there's a difference in law if you're working for the franchisee rather than Ronald McDonald himself or the Kroc brothers, whoever McDonald's are these days?
There are technicalities to it, but it's still the McDonald's brand that you are working for. And it's McDonald's who will take the rap for this. And in terms of making a claim, I know 5 years ago a lot of these claims were settled, and I'm not sure, I think it was McDonald's who settled them. But in terms of what's happening in the culture, that's a McDonald's problem, and that's their universal problem. It's not about individual franchises, it's about what they're allowed to get away with. Their chief exec, just a couple of years ago in the US, had to resign because of an inappropriate relationship at work. You've got to ask what they're doing.
So when you say the culture of, a culture of, there will be people watching and listening thinking, what does she actually mean by a culture? For God's sake, it's a fast food restaurant. There are people frying chips, there are people serving chips, there are people bringing the burgers in from the freezer, there are people squirting that milkshake thing, some people are taking the drive-through orders. What culture? What do you mean by a culture?
Well, everybody will have to have some kind of training when they join the job, and McDonald's do diversity and inclusion training. The culture would be something along the lines of they expect the women to go to the front because they're the pretty-looking ones, and the boys to go to the back because they do the work.
Would they say that? Is that
there is an allegation
that
there's an expletive goes to the front. So women go to the front, and they're on the good-looking ones go to the front on the tills to attract male customers in.
And is that something that's up to the individual managers, or that's something that comes down all the way from head office in America, or what?
It's up to individual managers, but there has to be leadership from the top. Is where it starts. If somebody says this is not going to happen, it won't happen.
But you know how in a bar or a pub, it's very often the case, I'm not saying always, but very often the case that the most beautiful or attractive young woman with the biggest and most accommodating cleavage is the person serving the drinks, the front of house, front-facing, very much front-facing person.
Wears it all on the balcony.
Yeah, and exactly. And similarly, in a hairdresser's or a beauty salon, you will have a very, conventionally pretty, kind of Barbie-style attractive woman usually on the front desk because it's that kind of establishment and that makes some kind of sense. Is it legal to do that? Is that within kind of employment law that you can put the one you consider to be the pretty one in a place where the pretty one will attract the most business? Is that allowed?
Not necessarily, no. You could say that's discrimination on the grounds of sex, absolutely, but she's probably playing to her strengths, that woman, and she wants to work in the bar. That's fine, she'll get tips, whatever. She won't be being felt up and molested and harassed and... there's rape accusations against employees at McDonald's. Men who will prey on younger women.
Yeah.
And they're usually 17-year-olds who are 0 hours contract, as you say, so they feel very vulnerable. And it's a very low-paid job. Let's face it, McDonald's is the old archetype of the Mc job. It's a low-paid job. It's a lowly job to start with.
Yes.
And that's what they're preying on.
You might think in a very low-paid job, if you didn't like it, you'd walk away and do another low-paid job somewhere else. You might think that as you're not looking at becoming chairman of the board or even manager of your particular branch, and you're in the very insecure, very unpleasant, very low-paid situation, that you would get out of there if that kind of thing was happening to you, wouldn't you?
And I think they are getting out of there, and they're now raising their voice because they're fed up and they've had enough. And I don't blame them. My daughter's 16, she's got a part-time job. She's not treated like that. But if she was at McDonald's and being treated that way, I'd say, get out and we're going to take some action.
All right. Is it unfair that so much of the attention in our conversation is focused on McDonald's when, just as Harvey Weinstein made it seem for a while, as if #MeToo, abuse of power, sexual abuse in a working relationship was the province of Hollywood and, film, and then we all knew it wasn't at all. It was happening in our local geography department. It was happening in the building society down the street. Nothing to do with Hollywood whatsoever. That was just the place for that. Is the same true of McDonald's here? McDonald's is being, the kind of scapegoat here, but actually in similar environments all over the country, particularly catering, particularly cleaning, particularly the hospitality industry where people are very low paid and in very short contracts, this is happening everywhere.
Well, I work with some big employers who work in hospitality and it doesn't happen in their employment because they take really strictly their responsibilities to their employees. So
Right.
I think it is probably fair that we're targeting McDonald's because that's a huge, for the Bakers Union to say we've had 1,000 claims and that was 5 years ago. And here we are, and it's been uncovered again. Nothing really has changed. So McDonald's has got a problem. And I think it is fair that we target McDonald's because it's them that's got the problem.
Well, let's talk to Jim Murphy about this. Jim, you're an employee relations expert at Hamilton Nash. Have you had wind of this kind of thing happening at branches of McDonald's in the United Kingdom? Is this something that is news to you or something that you knew about?
It's something I've heard about several times. It's not uncommon to hear rumours of this sort of activity. My own daughter worked at McDonald's briefly when she was paying her way through her studies, and she would tell me about some of the shenanigans that go on. Nothing, fortunately, that reached the threshold of sexual harassment, but to Jo Mackie's point, it all plays to the culture and the environment in these restaurants.
And what would you have said to your daughter had she delivered you an anecdote that you didn't think was acceptable? You didn't think was just shenanigans, as you put it, but you thought was really,
yes. Yes.
illegal or immoral or just unpleasant?
Absolutely. In fact, this is one of the key points, is I had to educate her on her rights and protections and all of the things that these poor folks are not aware of. I mean, the average age of a McDonald's employee in the UK is only 20, because it does attract school leavers, people in their first roles, or people earning a little bit of pocket money, and they're not well informed on their rights and protections. So in that particular case, in my own case, I did explain to her what her rights and protections were and what action she should take if something did cross the line.
And what action should she have taken?
Well, in the first case, and this actually is part of the problem probably that they're having at McDonald's, is you don't have an HR person sitting in all the restaurants. That's obviously not practical. They have a central confidential reporting mechanism. Now, in my case, I gave her the reassurance and confidence to use that mechanism, but many of these workers won't do that. There's a psychological inhibition that kicks in that prevents people reporting things: fear of recrimination, fear of getting further harassment or bullying as a consequence, a fear they wouldn't be believed. In some cases, unfortunately, there's an element of victim shaming, either by third parties or even self-denial on their own part. So it's not enough just to say you have a mechanism. When it comes to the culture that we were just talking about earlier, it's got to be substantive and not just performative.
And Jo, the situation whereby you're a low-paid employee at McDonald's, you're probably young. There's, let's say, a manager preying on you, or let's say a more senior member of the kitchen staff or something preying on you, and you don't like it, and you know it's not part of your job description and it's not acceptable, but you need the money, and you don't want to be labelled a troublemaker, and you don't want to be fired, and you're just not sure how to carry on in your job, but also complain about this and make a formal complaint. What are you supposed to do? You're
supposed to go, as we've heard, you're supposed to go to the group HR director or the boss of the entire place that you're in. If it's your manager, go to the person above them and make that complaint and ask to be moved to a different section. If you don't like that, go to a different section, go to a different store. That's an option for you. But ultimately, you do not have to stand for this. It's illegal. It's sexual harassment. It's not allowed in UK law. It's McDonald's who are to blame. It's not you as the individual. And, you don't want to be labelled a troublemaker. You're not being a troublemaker. You're just, you're not being taken advantage of by these men.
It's always so much easier to say it, though, when you're sitting with me in the studio. You shouldn't have to put up with this. You don't have to put up with this. It isn't legal. There's no reason why you would put up with this. But I mean, I know somebody who was a postgraduate, extremely confident, articulate, highly educated at a Magic Circle law firm. And one of the senior partners would take her ponytail and wrap it very, very slowly around his wrist, sort of caressing her neck as he did it. And this person was very well aware that if any complaint was made, then this person would instantly be branded a party pooper, someone without a sense of humour, someone that wasn't on track for promotion, somebody who wasn't kind of in the spirit and the groove of the occasion. All of those things that you don't want to be labelled, especially when you're ambitious and you do see a career. It's different at McDonald's where you don't see a career, but you're doing it because you want to pay the bills you want to eat, for God's sake. So in every situation, whoever you are are really, and whatever kind of level of employment, actually making the move to make the actual formal complaint from within the place where you're still being paid is really difficult to do, isn't it?
It is, and this is the power dynamic that I speak about. It's particularly younger people and with women, there's a power dynamic, and it's very difficult. But, you know, I was a trainee solicitor and I wouldn't have stood for that, and I didn't. I remember it happened to me and I didn't. And I'm here now, that's okay, it does happen, and you can stand up for yourself, and it doesn't mean that you'll be sacked. In fact, the law expressly protects you from being sacked as a whistleblower. If you suffer any victimisation as a result, that's a big deal in the courts. The courts will come down against the employer very harshly for that.
And are people supposed to find money to do this if they practically want to complain? Do they have to pay a lawyer or pay somebody? They won't have any money to do it.
Any trade union will have a law firm that represents them. So if the Bakers Union, for example, the first people who broke this story 5 years ago, it wasn't the BBC, it was the Bakers Union. So 5 years ago, the Bakers Union took McDonald's to task. And if you're a member of a union, whatever level of employment you are, they will have lawyers who will take that claim for you. And not all law firms are expensive, and not all law firms don't do pro bono work, which is free work. A lot of law firms will do these kind of things for free.
If you work at a McDonald's franchise, do you think it feels as if you work just for that person who owns that particular McDonald's or the two nearby? It doesn't feel as if you've got any link with the central brand or America or anything else?
I don't think so, because they're all wearing their particular uniform. They've got the golden arches, they've got little badges with the stars on. Everything around you in a store is branded, and it's that global McDonald's brand. So I'm pretty sure it's the global McDonald's brand we're talking about.
All right, let's talk to Jim. And Jim, your final advice for anybody who is in any related branch of work, so not just McDonald's, but any other fast food outlet or hotel chain or anywhere where they feel that they are being, or they know what treatment they're having meted out to them. So if they're being harassed, bullied, abused, sexually accosted, and that is supposedly part of their working day, and they know they shouldn't have to put up with this at all, what would you suggest that they do?
Well, absolutely. And they really should make sure that they do raise the concern at the appropriate level, find those centralized contacts if they don't feel comfortable raising it in the local branch or environment where they are. But also, I would say, whilst we've been talking about the victims of this, it's not just the victim that has the right to report it. If you witness harassment of a third party, you are still able to report it. And I would certainly encourage folks not to stand by and make sure they raise a concern if they see someone else on the receiving end.
That's a very good point, isn't it, Jo?
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, if you see somebody mistreating somebody.
You'll see in the football press, there was a lot of stuff about, you see in the adverts on TV, men, just stick up for the women around you if they're getting some kind of aggression or abuse for being footballers or playing football, and it makes a huge difference. Don't stand for it. It's not okay. It's your daughter, it's your wife, it's your girlfriend, whoever it is. Just think, that's a human there. It's just another person. Let's not stand for it.
And it's not part of the working day.
No, absolutely
Any job you do,
it's
whatever the job
illegal.
is, senior, junior, whatever you're doing, that is not supposed to be something that you have to face.